mine.
so,
His older brother was down there.
yeah.
You can gather
Yeah, they
evidence.
settled into that neighborhood.
That's a nice neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
I like it out there.
Write it out.
Oh, it's a damn deer.
Everybody here?
I see them all.
Everybody's here?
Did during the day.
You ready?
That's a bad.
I'm ready. Are you
They
ready?
look all right.
I'm always ready to go more or less.
There's a Lansing, and they were all grazing all the way down
Oh.
in the fields.
Yeah.
It's not like somebody's holding her back,
Something that's run by.
other than evidence, maybe.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Grand Traverse County Ways and Means Committee to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bonnie, will you call the roll, please?
Inman,
Here?
Lathrop,
Here.
Lemko,
Here.
Max Bauer. Here. Rennie.
Here.
Thomas.
Yep.
Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am. All present. The first item of business, or the next item of business, is the approval of the February 20th minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve those minutes as presented.
Motion by Inman, supported by Thomas. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. This brings us to the first opportunity for public comment. Bonnie, would you read the rules, please?
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions, if any. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. The chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak. Public comment will be solicited during the 2 public comment periods noted in Rule 5.4, Order of Business. However, public comment will generally be received at any time during the meeting regarding a specific topic currently under discussion by the board. Members of the public wishing to comment should raise their hand or pass a note to the clerk in order to be recognized, and shall not address the board until called upon by the chairperson.
Having heard the rules for public comment, is there anyone wishing to make public comment at this time? None of you students want to come and speak before the county board?
I don't blame
They didn't know that that was part of the assignment?
We'll try not to embarrass them too much.
I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing no public comment, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. David, do you have anything you want to add, or
I do not.
do any commissioners have any items to add?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay. Motion by Inman, supported by Lathrop. Further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. We have no special orders of business this evening, so that brings us to the consent calendar. If you would, please.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval, is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. Receive and file. Full year 2012 Workers' Compensation Report. B, approval none. And
That's the end of it. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to have any item pulled from the consent calendar? Is there any board member wishing to pull an item?
Good or not.
Okay, then I will accept a motion to approve the Workman's Compensation Report.
I'll make that motion.
Support.
Motion by Thomas, supported by Lemkool. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the last column, that the paragraph, Grand Traverse County employees continue to do an excellent job in notifying supervisors of incidents as they occur, even when the medical attention is not required. I just want to compliment our employees at how well they're being safe and working in our community, and we appreciate all the efforts that they're doing. So.
Roll call vote, please.
Lathrop,
Yes.
Lemkool,
Yes.
Max Bauer,
Excuse me.
Rennie,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yep.
Inman,
Yes.
Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, having approved the consent calendar, having no items removed from the consent calendar, brings us to department action items. First item is the Land Conservancy. Matt's here. I'm assuming this is his ball game.
Yes.
Hi, folks. Probably have in your packet a memo from me.
Introduce yourself, please.
I'm sorry, Matt McDonough with the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy. The DNR has requested some assistance from us in helping them to acquire 160 acres in the southern part of Whitewater Township. It's 160 acres. It's completely surrounded by state land. It also, a couple other features about it, there's a snowmobile trail that runs through the northeastern corner of the property, and the Bassa Single Track mountain bike trail just touches the western boundary of the property. Actually, I have an updated aerial photograph if you're interested that shows the location of those. They're going to be applying to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund for a grant to acquire the property. It's currently listed with Bob Brick. There's a new requirement now, when the state goes to buy land, they need to get a resolution of support from the local unit of government. At least one of those one of those units of government, either the township or the county, that one of those resolutions has to accompany the application. The other resolution can come in anytime between the date of the application and the date of the trust fund meeting, which isn't until the first week in December. Was unable to get on Whitewater Township's agenda to get their resolution or hear from them. So I talked with Dave, and he said that he'd allow me to come speak with you about it.
Okay, any questions from commissioners? Herb?
Yeah, this is in Whitewater Township,
That's correct.
and have you gone to Whitewater Township with this request?
I talked with Ron Pop about 3 to 4 weeks ago to give him a heads up about it. And I was waiting for some information from the state and then to send on to him, just like the paper that you have. I got it to him a week before their board meeting, which was would have been about 2 weeks ago. And he said that wasn't enough time for them to consider, to get it into the packet for them to consider it. So I then asked if I could be put on there. Apparently they've got a meeting on the 27th as well of this month, but he said that it's likely they wouldn't have a quorum then because of spring break. And so I missed the opportunity to talk to Whitewater Township about it. That's why I'm here before you.
I also talked to Ron Pop, and he indicated that he didn't personally have any problem with it, but he didn't have time to get, input from the public and put it on the agenda properly and do all those things that needed to be done, in his opinion. When I talked with Matt about this, this is a grant application.
Yeah, the DNR is going to be applying to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund for a grant. It's going to be about $9.5 million. I'm sorry, $950,000.
I was going to say.
Yeah, it's listed for $975 right now. They did an internal appraisal down in Lansing and think it's probably worth around $945, so I think they're going to apply for $950.
What if they want to buy our property?
Probably.
And it's just part of the process now, is that, they want to make sure that they're not, pursuing funds to acquire property within a unit of government that doesn't support, the state buying land.
What's the property taxes for Whitewater Township worth on this?
Yep, right now the current taxes on the entire property is $8,326. The PILT payments that'll come in, if the state buys it, will be $7,981. It's a $345 difference. So there will be a slight loss in tax revenue overall, and that's the entire property tax bill. But, on the bonus side, on the plus side, you're going to have 160 acres that are going to be open to the public for recreation, Great Lakes for fishing, nice trails, those types of things.
Can we tell them that Grand Traverse County owns a parcel of property in Whitewater Township we'd like to talk to them about too?
I've had that conversation. They are interested. It's actually not that far from this piece.
Yeah.
I have both of them circled on my map, and they're really close together.
The challenge, here's the challenge, is that because a unit of government owns the 160 that you guys own, it's not eligible for trust fund funding. Board policy 90.1 states that you can't use trust fund money to buy land that's already owned by a unit of government. So they are interested in buying that. Matter of fact, I've got a memo to that effect. But, they'd have to, find the funding somewhere other than the trust fund, so.
Besides, it came from the state. That's where we got it.
I know.
Where's the cap on the amount of land that the DNR can purchase?
Yeah, it's a good question. They've got a buffer right now of about 17,000 acres before they reach that cap. I don't know the exact number, but it's slightly less than 20,000. I think it's in the 17,000 acre range.
Well, and I think the DNR is in conversation with some townships and other people about doing some land swaps too that, may change that 17,000 acre number.
Yeah, their goal, this is what they consider a consolidation parcel. They're trying to fill in these holes, these properties where they're surrounded by state land on four sides, and get rid of those properties that are sort of fingers that stick up out of the state forest land or are isolated and surrounded by private land. Those are more management headaches for those guys because they've got more boundary to monitor than against, adjacent to privately owned property. What the goal is to try to, sell those parcels off. This is what they call the surplus parcels, and use it to help consolidate their holdings.
Dick? I make a motion that we approve the resolution of support for the acquisition of the Stromboli Lake property.
Okay, I have a motion, second by
I'll second it,
Motion by Thomas,
but-
supported by Inman.
I have a
For
comment.
discussion? Go ahead, Dick, or Larry.
I just feel it would have been it would have been better if it would have been presented to Whitewater first and then came to us with a recommendation from Whitewater. So I'd feel more comfortable about the motion if the motion maker would agree that the approval would be subject to Whitewater Township also with their consent.
I'll throw that in.
All right, I'll second it. I'll second that
Okay,
amendment.
so.
How's
so
the
we-
timing on this, Matt?
Well, Ron wouldn't commit to putting me on the agenda on the 27th because he wasn't sure if he was going to have a quorum or not. Now, I can say that we have to get there, there's already sort of that safeguard's already built in a little bit, Larry, because they have to get Whitewater Township's resolution of support before the trust fund will approve the grant in December. It's just that they only need one resolution of support as part of the application, and that application is April 1st.
Fine.
So are we comfortable that we're going to submit a motion to approve, or support, a letter of support for the purchase by the DNR and the Whitewater Townships? If they don't get Whitewater Townships, the trust fund's not going to fund this.
Right, and
It's
if
that
you'd like,
simple,
I'd be
hands
happy to
down.
come back and report, after, because I hope to get on their agenda next month. If that doesn't happen, if they, fail to pass the resolution, then I can come back here and you can always, withdraw, pass the resolution, withdraw it,
Is there harm just leaving the motion as is?
The way Dick originally stated it is fine, but if they make it contingent, then I don't know if it really holds up, because I won't have Whitewater Township's resolution of support before the application
To submit
deadline.
the application.
Okay, I would remove that last part.
All right, I'll agree with that.
Okay, so, Bonnie, do you want to read this? Sure you do.
Flip a coin.
Chris, are we all right to?
Yeah, you're doing
Yeah, you can do
just
that.
fine. Yeah.
Moved by
Called a
Tom.
friendly amendment.
Okay.
Moved by Thomas, seconded by Inman, to recommend approval of the Department of Natural Resources submission of an application titled Stromboli Lake Property to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund.
Okay, you've heard the motion and the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. You're all set, Matt.
Okay, thank you.
The chairman will sign that. Probably we'll have it signed yet this week, that way you can get it, and we'll ratify it at our board meeting next week.
Great.
Or we can ratify it next week, and then you can have it. If you're under the gun, we can do it before that.
Okay, yeah, just before April 1st.
Well, then we better,
I'll
we better do
follow
it
up with
beforehand.
you. So,
Are
thank
all
you
the
very much.
commissioners okay with him signing it, and we'll ratify it next week?
Yep. Thank you.
So you're talking about, do you want to make a motion that this makes it immediate effect, or are you going to wait till next week?
Let's wait till next
We'll
Wednesday.
just,
Oh, wait, okay.
we'll just
That's
ratify
fine.
this, the chairman's signature as part of our packet next week.
Okay, very good.
Okay, that brings us to Parks and Recreation.
Thanks, Matt.
Jason?
Mr. Chairman, may I distribute some handouts to the
Certainly.
commissioners?
Good evening, Commissioners. Jason Jones, your County Parks and Recreation Director. I'm excited to be here this evening and presenting to you an item that I'm not asking for action on this evening. But I wanted to ask Megan from the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy to come present with me about a DNR Trust Fund application that we would like to make, DNR Trust Fund project we'd like to make application for on the April 1st deadline. The project is an improvement project out at Maple Bay. Maple Bay is a 400-acre parcel that was purchased utilizing trust fund money, as well as a variety of other funding mechanisms, granting mechanisms. Back in 2002, a master planning process was completed in 2007 that outlined community need for development at 3 different portions of the park. The 400-acre park is an integral piece to birding and the natural environment in Acme Township, and we're here to ask for your consideration, but asking for actual action via resolution at next week's meeting to match $80,000 of the total $430,000 project. Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about the project before I talk about
Absolutely, sure, thank you. I'm Megan Olds with the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy, and first I would just like to share a little bit of information about the need for this project that's been identified through some public surveys and focus groups, as well as through the county's own planning process. About a year ago, the Conservancy partnered with Tart Trails, Inc. on a public survey that was distributed through the Traverse City Business News. We invited residents and businesses to give us some feedback on basically all of the parklands and trail assets that were on the ground in the US 31 corridor, roughly between the Traverse City State Park in East Bay up to Elk Rapids. And what we found were that people were really excited about some of the beach access opportunities along the corridor, but they wanted more of it, and they also wanted to see more trails, better signage, and more restroom facilities at some of their parks. They also felt, through our outreach with business leaders, that we really needed to be doing a better job marketing the assets that were already there. And I don't know how many of you have been to Maple Bay, but it's an amazing property. It's really a gem that, represents some of the best of northern Michigan. It has over 2,000 feet of frontage along the Grand Traverse Bay, sandy beach to walk. It has forested dunes. It has some beautiful walking trails. It has active agriculture, and it has a wetland complex that's really critical to the health of water quality in the Grand Traverse Bay. Some other data that I think are interesting is that if you look at the way our community is growing and the demographic shifts that we're seeing happen, the data I've read show that by 2020, little more than 50% of our population will be over the age of 65 within the Northwest Michigan region. And of that number of people, around 30% are projected to have some kind of mobility issues that could be considered a disability. And so as we design for our citizens and our users of our park, I think it's really important to keep in mind how we can make these park places accessible to people as they age and also as young people move to our community. The same assets that are helpful for folks who struggle with mobility issues as they age are also great assets for people who are trying to get their toddlers around in strollers or who just need restroom facilities in a different kind of way. So as we worked on this project in partnership with the county, we wanted to incorporate those design elements into the plan. So what you see in front of you are some site plans that show the improvements that are part of the trust fund development grant request that Jason mentioned. You can see the overall plan up here. It includes proposed improvements basically at 2 zones on the property. And I'm going to stand up and hopefully I can project enough so that you can hear me if that's okay.
Use that microphone on the end.
Where is it? Oh, this one here?
It's really terrible.
Okay. So you can see this area right here is the Bates Road enlargement. Within your handouts, you have both this overall plan and then also some specific documents that show the enlargement areas in greater detail. At the Bates Road area, this segment features a new driveway leading into the property and a new parking lot, which features some universally accessible parking areas that are connected to new sidewalks that are paved and universally accessible, that lead to picnic areas that are universally accessible, and a single vault toilet restroom facility that's also universally accessible. This area of the property also features some new mode walking paths that take advantage of providing access to the creek, the wetland complex that's there. So this would be new access along Bates Road that would also potentially be part of a scenic bike route trailhead that the TART Trails have been discussing. So if you're wanting to have a scenic road biking experience, this is a place where you could potentially, drive up with your bike, get out of your car, and then have a great biking experience between Elk Rapids and Acme. Are there any questions about this location? The other feature of this is our improvements over here. We're calling this the beach area. There's an existing parking lot on this side of the property that people use when they're trying to access the trails that lead down to the beach. The parking lot is well used and is in need of some improvements. What we're proposing to do at this location is move the parking lot and move it closer to the woods, creating sort of a nook where there would also be a universally accessible pavilion and picnic area, and also restroom facilities and a hand pump for water and grills. We're also proposing new trails that would loop through the woods at this location. Those would be unpaved. Any questions about those improvements? Okay, well, Jason mentioned that the overall cost for this project is around $430,000. The Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund allows you to ask for up to $300,000 for a trust fund development grant. That's the maximum you're allowed to apply for. They also require a 25% match from the applicant, which is Grand Traverse County. The Conservancy Board of Directors discussed this project and is really passionate about it and wants to support its implementation. So our board did authorize the Conservancy to offer a cash match of $50,000 toward the match that's required for this effort. And as Jason mentioned earlier, what's being requested of the county is to consider an $80,000 cash match, which would supplement the Conservancy's match for an overall match of around $130,000 for the development application to the trust fund.
The information is not, that information isn't in your memo because we didn't have final engineering costs when I prepared that memo. As Megan said, the total project, $430,000. The local match, we're proposing $130,000 local match. That represents 30%, which the requirement is a 25% match for the DNR trust fund. If we kick in the extra $30,000, that takes us into the 30% category for match, which makes our gives us some extra points in the evaluation scale for the DNR trust, or for the trust fund grant. Of that, the Regional Land Conservancy Board offered a $50,000 match to what the county would put in, which leaves us with $80,000 to cover. That $80,000, to put it in perspective, is only 18% of this project. So it's quite an investment to a project, and to a park that was identified as being important to our community through its 2007 master planning process, but also received the second highest votes for parks improvements during our most recent 5-year master planning process from the public. So this project's been identified utilizing 2 different planning processes through County Parks and Recreation Department. At our meeting tomorrow night of the County Parks and Recreation Commission, we'll be holding the public hearing related to this project. I'll be asking the Parks and Recreation Commission for a resolution And then that resolution will be passed on to this commission. And in next week's meeting, I'll be asking for a resolution of support for the project, as well as an allocation, or what I like to think of as an investment, of $80,000 for this Parks Development project.
Larry? Just a couple questions, Jason, if I could, and Megan. Thanks for coming, Megan.
My
Jason.
pleasure.
I remember when we, as a county commission, undertook this project as a proposal, and we had a lot of public input on it, both at our level and at Acme Township, and it was felt that if we did move forward and acquire the land, that we wanted it to remain passive in nature, and that's been kind of the standing resolution from Acme Township in terms of a recommendation to us that they would like to have that as a passive thing, and they don't want ball diamonds and all that kind of stuff there, soccer fields and all those kinds of things. So I like the plan to the extent where it remains passive, but it does provide the ability for the public to come in and out quite easily, and it has picnic areas and better access to the beach. So I like how it's formatted. I guess the question I have is on the 80,000. One of the comments that we had as a board when we first acquired this thing was, it's great owning it, but we're probably not going to have very much money at that time to do anything with it. And it's been kind of left alone in its own natural state. And as you know, we've been on downward revenues for the last 4 years or so. We might be stabilizing this year, but we don't know that yet. So, and we haven't budgeted for this as well. So, and if we did do it, the question I have for you is this 80,000, can that be staggered over a time period rather than all one shot?
It would have to come in one, I believe it'd have to come in one shot. One of the things to consider, though, this $80,000 commitment is pending approval of the grant from the Department of Natural Resources. As Matt mentioned earlier, I guess, how's the best to word that? The approval of the projects from the Department of Natural, or the DNR Trust Fund, we find out about those in
December.
December. So there would be some time between now and December, if the grant was awarded, before that money would have to be paid out.
Are you asking if you could budget for it over several years? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if you know, the time, basically the question is, how long is it going to take to implement phase one? And
Right.
can that match grant go over a period of 2 years or whatever as the project is moving forward? Can that money be contributed as the project was moving forward rather than all up front? And let's assume it takes 24 months to complete phase one, then it'd be a $40,000 allocation for 2 years.
I think from a cash flow lens, we could make that work. I think what we would do in that circumstance, if we had a commitment or resolution from the county, the Conservancy would probably, I would have to ask my board for permission to do this, but we could potentially front the money, front the cash flow, and then the county could pay the Conservancy back those funds.
All right.
I think that's definitely something we could consider doing.
All right, good.
Other questions? Herb?
Couple of questions. One is that it's nice to see that Matt's here, and I'm just wondering about the possibility of whether or not his organization may be able to do a fundraiser and start some sort of a trust fund for this facility. Because, you know, maintenance is also one of those things that we have to work on, because if you're going to put a couple of restrooms, somebody's got to do that. If you're going to be putting driveways and things like that, somebody's got to plow the driveways, and that's all going to come right out of your budget. And your budget has been going downhill, not uphill. And so I'm just wondering about the possibility of looking at maybe starting some sort of a trust fund for Maple Bay Park and get people to donate money for its perpetuity of maintenance and also future additional whatever our needs is. I know you did a public survey, and there was 3 different scenarios, if I remember correctly, that people definitely did not want to do recreation on there, that they wanted to be more passive, like Larry said. So, and I think this is really fitting with that. But I'm just questioning whether or not we might be able to think longer range, look farther out as to what is our total, I mean, that master plan, I think, was developed, but I'm not sure how far it went and how this fits with that master plan that you did, and whether or not we can start looking at putting some sort of a trust fund together.
Just before Megan answers, identifying friends groups and possibly discussing a foundation is something that, for parks, is something that that the Parks and Recreation Commission has talked about. It's something that is somewhat related. There are some related goals within our 3-year strategic plan to establish some foundations and some different organizations like that. So it's something we may be able to do internally, but I'll let Megan
Sure.
answer on behalf of the Conservancy.
Yeah, what I can share with you, Herb, is that we have been working with local units of government on some endowment building related to either trust fund acquisition projects or development projects. One of the other projects I'm working on right now is the Acme Shoreline Initiative. And as part of that project, we actually built an endowment into our fundraising campaign. And so it's a $1.6 million campaign for the phase we're working on now. $250,000 of that is for an endowment for the park. And so I absolutely think that there's an opportunity for us to start talking about that for Maple Bay and other properties as we work together on this.
I just really think that there's a lot of people that really want to use that and probably more willing to put some money toward this thing. But, if we don't take care of our future, I mean, this was a $9 million purchase a number of years ago. It is a gem of a piece of property, and we do need to have protection. But we've really, the Parks and Recreation, I don't know if they've ever really looked at how do we maintain this, and how do we put the stuff in here that we need to put in. They did the master plan, but nobody ever put any money into it. Now you're coming to us and saying, okay, now you need 80,000, and we're saying, where's that in our priority list? And is that our highest priority to put money into this part, or is there a better priority to put it into something else, or do we put it into public safety, or do we put it into human resources? We've got to deal with those kind of things too, and that's what makes it really difficult for us to try and make these kinds of decisions right out of the box to determine where we want to put our money.
Dick?
Or you could save a little money on maintenance by closing it in the winter.
Well, yeah, I understand, but people are going to want to go in there and use it in the wintertime.
Well, they can walk in.
Yeah.
Other comments? David?
They give you a schedule for completion of the project and once it gets started? I assume this is a 2014 project?
Well, we won't find out about the grant awards until December, and the money probably won't be authorized by the legislature until the first quarter of 2014. And so the earliest that bids could possibly go out for the construction work would be the late spring or summer of 2014.
Okay, so...
We're realistically looking at late summer, fall of 2014 before you're going to put a shovel in the ground.
Correct.
So we're, as far as a budget question in Larry's regard is, we can deal with that in 2014.
One more question, please. The time frame for spending the trust fund monies? If it's awarded, for example, in spring of 2014, how long would we have to spend the funds before they would be considered, they would
I don't know what the
be pulled back?
timeline is for development grants, but I'm guessing it's a 12-month timeline. I know with acquisition grants, we've often asked for extensions and received them
It is a
Okay.
1-year timeline.
Okay.
from the date of the grant award.
Yeah, I do know of a couple that have 24 months to do the development piece, but I can't remember if they were extensions or if they weren't, but they had 2 years to do the thing. Larry?
What is the time frame that now is necessary for a resolution of support? And I'm just assuming you have to upfront all these support resolutions to make your application, and then they get reviewed later on, 8 months later or whatever. I mean, is this something that needs to be done and committed to ASAP in order to get in line? Is that what I'm
This is the
is that
same
what I'm
timeline
sensing?
as the trust fund grant that Matt was just mentioning. It's the same cycle for acquisition and development. April 1 is the deadline, and the resolutions are required as part of the application.
Okay.
So the timeline that we've established for this is Parks and Recreation Commission will have a public hearing related specifically to this project at tomorrow night's Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. There'll also be a resolution that's been drafted that will be sent to this commission for approval next week during your meeting.
Yeah, my question is,
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Chris, do you have a question?
no, Herb asked me a question.
Okay. I guess I have a couple of comments. One, it doesn't seem possible that we've owned this piece of property 10 years already.
Yeah.
I was a big supporter of the original acquisition. The opportunity to preserve a piece of this land, a piece of property like this for the community and for our future generations doesn't come often. I think that I certainly like the idea of what you're proposing here, because I think it still gives us that passive thing that we want, but it gives us the amenities that people need to be able to use the property. The idea that governmental entities, and there seems to be a lot of it going on lately, are acquiring property, but they have no plans on what they're going to do with it. And it's real easy to sit back and say, well, we want to keep it natural. But, and then we get into the discussions about, conservation easements and all of those kind of things on some of those pieces of property, which I have a lot of other opinions on, but it's not the place or the time. But the big thing is, we acquired this piece of property 10 years ago with the idea that we were going to preserve this for future generations.
Right.
But, that being said, we wanted to keep it natural. We have to provide the amenities that will allow people to use it. And that's what this plan does. I'd like to say that, we had the $80,000 right here, and that we can just tell you, identify where it's coming from, but I don't know that we have that at this point. And that's my only concern about this at this point, is where the $80,000 is coming from. I'm guessing that it'll be in the 2014 budget. I don't see any money being expended in 2013. The grants don't even get announced until December. My history tells me most of them, you don't see a dime until March, sometimes later than that. And we won't be starting any construction, so there'll be no expenditure until late summer. And we can also play around a little bit somewhere along the way about some in-kind services during some part of the construction, usually. I don't know if this particular grant application allows for in-kind service.
Danny says he'd really love to have a project to work on.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that Danny will either, but there are ways that, we can do some of the in-kind services, so. Do we have a motion to approve?
I don't think he's not asking for that tonight.
Okay, you just want a conceptual
Correct.
idea, a little head rattling, and that's the idea? Okay.
Correct.
Yes. He wants to have the public hearing before he brings it back to us.
Herb was whispering to me, and so I feel that when we do that, we should say what I was asked and what my response was, and he asked me if I was in favor of this, and I am. This is going to make the park much more usable. There is nothing, if you're a runner, there's nothing more fun than running on a path through a beautiful piece of property like this. I think this park will be more enjoyed than it already is if we move forward with this. And again, my concern is, like everybody else's, how are we going to budget for this? And we need to have a discussion, in my opinion, how we budget in the future for these events, so that.
Okay, good.
We've got a
Any other
window washer volunteer.
Thank you.
Maybe
Let's
we can get her to work in
remind me of
parking
that
lots too.
again.
Do we have any further questions for Megan or Jason?
Do I have your cell phone number, by the way,
Thanks,
to
guys.
call you?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Ross Childs was the chairman when this was brought through.
What?
He was the county administrator.
He was a county administrator.
He was the administrator, I'm sorry.
I was chairman.
And you were chairman.
2001.
Yeah.
That $9 million check went through my hand.
Yeah.
And I had trouble keeping my feet on the ground.
I was going to say, you didn't run with it?
Fall of 2001. I know exactly when it was.
Yeah.
Okay, remonumentation grant, Reinhardt and Bob are here. So, guys, if you'll identify yourselves for the The TV audience?
Reiner Reichert, Grand Traverse County GIS analyst and Grand Traverse County grant administrator for the remonumentation program.
Robert Mitchell, Grand Traverse County Surveyor.
And what I'm presenting here is that in December of last year, I applied for a remonumentation grant on behalf of Grand Traverse County with the state of Michigan. And we received the grant offer for $50,000, $50,823 to continue the remonumentation program. This is a program between the state and counties to research and reset survey corners, the original corners from the 1800s. Many of them have been destroyed, and this is to reset them permanently. So this is the 21st year of the program. This wasn't originally a 20-year program, but we're in our 21st year right now. This is the map that we have right here showing the progress. We're presently about 74% complete with the corners that need to be re-monumented in our county. We had 1,713 total corners. We have 1,259 completed as of this point. So with this grant, we're looking to continue monumenting 34 additional corners. There's no local match involved. The monies are through the Register of Deeds recording fees. And so what I'm looking to do is to find out if the board will accept the grant for $50,823 and to allow me to sign the grant agreement and to go for 40% startup payments for this year's program. I also have 4 contracts. For 3 are for the contract services in the amounts of $14,014 for
Excuse me, Ryan, can we handle this as 2 items, because we have to have 2 motions. So I'd like to...
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the Board of Commissioners 2013 remonumentation grant in the amount of $50,823.
We have to accept understand, we have to accept the grant money separate from entering into the contracts.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Inman, supported by Lathrop, to accept the remonumentation grant money in the amount of $50,823. Further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Okay, now we can talk about the contracts.
The second amount is the distribution of the funds. We have 4 contracts involved. 3 are for 3 different surveying firms to do the research and monumentation, and 1 additional contract for a 4th peer review surveyor to be involved. And the amounts are for Mitchell Associates, $14,014, Gosling Zubek, and also for Gordy Frazier, $12,951 each. And that's the difference is 1 additional corner for Mitchell and Associates. And for the 4th peer review member, $1,258.
You've seen a budget for the expenditure of this money. Do I have a motion to approve the contracts? Motion by Thomas. Any support?
Second.
Support by Limco. Motion by Thomas, supported by Limco, to enter into contracts with Mitchell and Associates for $14,014, Gosling Zubek for $12,951, Gordy Frazier for $12,951, and Corey Hughes in the amount of $1,258. Further discussion? David?
Has this ever been bid out?
This was originally done with a qualified bid selection.
How many years ago?
The original. At the
20
start
years
of the
ago?
program. Yes. This is what it was.
Hasn't been bid out since then?
We have not set up a committee for another qualified bid selection.
Okay.
This was originally set under, like you said, in our QBS, and just for a background history for you, the three firms that are currently doing remonumentation, I would say, control about 90% of the historic documents that are necessary for
Yeah, I've heard
putting
that
together
argument before.
dossiers to go out and find the corners.
Yeah.
Chris?
And we get good cooperation between the three firms.
I have never voted for this because of the way it is arranged, and so I'm going to be consistent, just like Sonny is on some issues. I'm not voting for
I'm not
this.
surprised.
I just might note that in my interviews, we talked about, in the remonumentation process, getting the GPS coordinates for these monuments. And I note that if you don't bid it out, you don't really get the right price for any of that. And it's obviously not included in the contracts today. So you're not going to get it for another year.
No,
Until we do that, until we decide we're going to find out what the price is for all these tasks and get a bid for them, we won't know what those are. Because, the world changed since 20 years ago.
Bob, do you want to comment?
Yeah, as far as the getting coordinate values, GPS coordinate values, I understand that, that's a little bit different than monumenting corners and reviewing histories and formulating the documentation to do it right.
Right.
And whereas the GPS operation, I'm not trying to simplify it, but it's more of a technical, mechanical type operation, and I understand that whenever that time comes forward to get the GPS coordinates, obviously that would be a bid item.
Right.
But based on some fundamental QBS requirement that the people that are bidding on it are capable of performing the duties.
Right.
Further questions? Larry?
Does this process have to be completed before you go out for GPS?
For bids.
The original funding and the way our grant was written, I wrote the original model plan for Grand Traverse County. The money, the initial phase of the money and how the program was initially set up was get the corners in the ground and get that done, and then do the coordinate circuit all at once.
All right, okay.
Or in sections or whatever.
All right, okay.
There's also, in addition, nobody's really discussed this before, I just bring it up. In addition to there being 500 and some corners to do yet, there's also the issue of perpetual maintenance. That initially this program was put together was going to fund continuing funding for whatever period of time, so when we get the 500 corners done, I'm sure there's going to be, at that point, a schedule of maintenance, because they get destroyed by road construction and vandalized and everything else. So it's pretty much, I think as long as it's still funded, it's pretty much an ongoing program.
Okay.
Herb?
Yeah. I do remember, Dave, when we interviewed you, and you talked about a whole different concept of doing these corners.
The road commission was
And, is this really important that we have to do that this month? To accept, we accept the grant, but we don't have to do the bids out, and we could ask Bob, for you to go out for bids on this?
Who's going to bid it?
For what?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's,
You've got...
our policy is
You only
if we
have
spend $50,000.
You only have a couple firms that can do it.
You don't, and you
I don't
don't, professional services, you don't have to...
Excuse me, if you want to go out and bids, that's your choice, but under the model plan, you might as well, you're going to have to go through the QBS process first to get 3 or 4 firms that
Who are qualified.
are qualified, and you can go through that process if you wish to.
We got them already.
I think you're going to come up with
Same names.
a similar answer that you have right now, but I wouldn't say for sure, but I feel that the firms that are doing right now will probably be under a competitive analysis under QBS would be rated very near the top, if not all three at the top. So, that's your choice.
Well, I think one of the key pieces that Bob mentioned briefly earlier is we need to remember that 80% of this job or better is the historic research. And these three firms hold 90% of the historic documents that have to do with where these corners ever should have been.
Right.
So the fact is, you can go contract with somebody else, but they don't have access to the direct records unless they go to Bob's office or they go to Gordy Fraser's office and ask them to use their records. And I'm not sure how well that's going to work either.
I've heard that argument before, Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
I've heard that argument before, and it turned out to be a spurious argument. It was not correct.
Is it?
It can be bid out, and the right price comes out of the at the end. And you have qualified people bidding on it and against each other. And, I don't buy the argument that only three people can do this.
What's the board's pleasure?
You got a motion?
I guess I just got one other question before we vote, Mr. Chairman. Dave, you had mentioned when you first came on board that, when we get into the subject matter, that it was when you were in Midland or another county, that the road commission did the GPS as they were doing road projects?
Yes.
And so they were just following along as these things were getting plotted?
The county purchased about a $7,000 GPS, very highly accurate GPS unit. And the road commission took that with them. We gave it to the road commission. And when they had projects and they got their engineering taken care of, they got their center lines, and they shot points for us, which were added to our GIS program, which made it infinitely more accurate.
Seems to me, if that's an option for us to look at, a very inexpensive way to do it.
Can we use this money to buy that machine?
No,
That's a good question. I don't think so, but I can check on that.
I can tell you that they just did what they called a Memo 16 from the state, and you can't buy anything other than do remonumentation of corners.
Okay.
It was being abused severely by some southeastern Michigan counties that had a huge budget, and they cut it off.
Okay.
So,
I think one of the things is GPS or no GPS, you have to identify where the corner is. Because it doesn't do any good to have GPS unless you go have the physical corner identified. And that's what we're doing now, is identifying the physical.
Well, center points of road intersections.
Right.
If you can get the GPS, the engineered center point of that, and get that shot, and get it back in, and put that into the system, that means that all the roads can be aligned along those points.
I would also like to add, you can be technically qualified as a licensed surveyor to do this work. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the quality or the correct documents that you want. And a case in point, and Dave, you could research it if you want to, Manistee County for several years took the low bid, and they got the low bid is what they got, and they've had a lot of problems with corners, and they backed off from that. They went out to the most qualified people to do the work because they have to go back and move corners and having problems. So they're not doing the lowest bid anymore, and that has happened in a couple other counties too, so.
Dick, you had a question?
Well, I think the remonumentation, finding those corners is a lot more important than running around with a GPS just to show you where they're at. Have you got a motion? Okay,
Chris?
I'll make one.
Well, as I said, I've never voted for this. I do not, I'm even less inclined to vote for this because it sounds like we're doing this just because we've always done it this way, rather than looking to see if there's a better way. And I would like to look to see if there's a better way, and I would like our administrator to look to see if there's a better way. And if he comes back to us and says, no, there is not a better way, fine. But we've always done it this way, and I've never liked the process. So I'm going to encourage my fellow commissioners to decline to vote for this.
I got one comment.
Larry?
It's my understanding that, Bob, you've been involved with this from like day one almost.
Yeah, I wrote the model plan for Grand Traverse County and had it approved.
And we've been working with these firms, they have all the data. 80%, am I correct? 80% of the whole thing is done already under this format. I just can't see changing and shifting and going in a different direction with 20% left, especially when the state's paying for it. So I'm going to vote for this motion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion by Thomas, supported by Limcool, to approve the contracts with Mitchell & Associates, Goslin, Guzek, Gordy Frazier, and Corey Hughes. Roll call vote, please.
Lemko,
Yes.
Maxbauer,
No.
Rennie,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yep.
Inman,
Yep.
Lathrop,
Yes.
Belak.
Yes, ma'am. Motion carries. Go find some corners.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Some corners.
Thank you, Reiner. Okay, that brings us to planning and development. Jean badgered me for almost 3 hours this morning, so now she's here to bother us some more.
All good, all positive, son.
Right?
Good evening. My name is Jean Dorenzi with the Planning and Development Department.
John Syke, Grand Traverse County Planning and Development Department.
The first agenda item is the County Allocation Targeted Program, and this is the two-year $300,000 allocation that we received from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. And I will apologize in advance, when I looked at your packet, you did not have within the packet the allocation targeted program. So I can appreciate and understand if you can't approve it tonight and refer it to the county board, but I would still like to have the opportunity to talk about the program and highlight the changes within the program that benefit Grand Traverse County, I believe. So
Motion to approve.
You want to approve the targeted strategy, or you want to approve
Okay.
allowing her to explain the strategy?
I'll move to approve it with her coming next week to talk about the strategy, if that works.
That's fine.
Support.
All right, I have a motion by Limcool, supported by Thomas, to approve the place-based targeting strategy for Grand Traverse County 2012-2013. Further discussion?
With the detail of the targeting at our board meeting.
You will, so as I understand it, Jean's going to make sure that you have the documentation of what that strategy actually is, and we will review that next week. Is that
Right.
correct?
Right.
Yes.
Chris?
Jean, I'll be voting no, just because I like to look at it before
Sure.
I vote, and I'm not going to vote in
We're
favor of
just-
something I haven't really seen.
We're really just deferring the item to the board meeting. Right. That's all we're doing.
I'm sure it's fine.
Well, in your packets, you received the entire housing inventory and the housing strategy.
Yeah.
And the big difference between the two, the targeted thing, gives us the opportunity, and what MISTA has allowed us to do, is to cite some out-county areas so that everything didn't have to be in the city of Traverse City. It's included the village of Fife Lake, the village of Kingsley, some areas in Green Lake Township, some areas in Grant Township, and some areas in Garfield Township, correct?
All of Garfield Township.
All of Garfield Township, okay. You know, to allow for, some housing development, which, some of us have complained for years, because every time we wanted to talk about affordable housing, it had to be in the city of Traverse City.
Yeah, but I'm odd. I like to read what I vote on.
That's fine, and I have no problem, and whether it's passed, whether it's not passed, it will be...
I'm sure it will be passed next week. I'm sure it
It'll be
will
passed,
be.
and it'll be on your agenda next week. We will pull it from the consent calendar and move forward.
Why don't we just have it under administrator's report? That'd be
You
the
want to just
best
have
way
it
to
under
go.
his report?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make sure that happens.
Okay.
So we don't have to vote on it?
Yeah.
Do we have a
We're just
motion?
gonna-
We have a motion on the
really to
floor,
defer it
so
to the
we'll go
board
ahead and
meeting.
vote. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Max Bauer?
No.
Rennie?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Inman?
Yep.
Lathrop?
Yes.
Lemko?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am. Moving forward with the environmental remediation.
Yes. The County Board of Commissioners referred this agenda item to the Brownfield Authority for consideration of the environmental remediation and closure report for a property known as the former ambulance garage, which now sits the Munson Medical Center emergency room. The Brownfield Authority considered this at their February meeting. For historical purposes, Grand Traverse County owned the ambulance garage, and during that ownership, there was an underground leak, which is a petroleum leak that impacted the soil and the groundwater. We sold the property to Munson Medical Center in 1998, and part of the agreement was that we would do ongoing remediation. We took the proceeds from the property sale and provided that to Grand Traverse Pavilions. They demolished the ambulance garage structure, and they also removed some of the soil as well. They have done some monitoring. They installed monitoring wells. They've done groundwater samplings as well. And the last report that went to DEQ was in 2008. When the Brownfield Authority looked at this, we wanted to be more in a proactive way, getting this to protect the Kids Creek and get the site ready for development, and also limit Grand Traverse County's liability on this to reduce it on our ledgers as well. I worked with DEQ, and they have agreed to review the draft closure report, and see if there's any gap data analysis. And if there is, they would do that analysis and soil water sampling and put it into a report for us, into the closure report, to be able to do what we want it to do, and to be more proactive and know how far the plume is, and how basically to protect the public health, safety, and welfare, and that the Kids Creek can prepare the site for development. And also, it provides us a better scope of that plume. It's very stable plume based on the reports that we have seen, and it has very little movement at all. And we have done enough soil data and groundwater data that I believe that if we need more, we'll have enough to be able to give to our civil council to limit the liability. So the Brownfield Authority is recommending that we give authorization to work with the Grand Traverse Pavilions and to ask DEQ for a grant to do additional data analysis to be in that proactive stance in the closure report.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Lemko, supported by Lathrop. Further discussion? Herb?
Yeah, I think there's one more step that you didn't cover, and that is the transfer of the title of this property to Munson. I think eventually that's what isn't that what Munson really wants in the future?
Munson has title to the property.
This is transferring our liability.
We want to eliminate and minimize our liability.
And if I could jump in, Mr. Chairman, what Munson has proposed is that if the county is going to require Munson to enter in a restrictive covenant saying that there's not going to be any wells, Munson has turned around and said, okay, county, well, we want you to agree that you're contractually obligated to do the corrective action. And what Gene and I have talked about is trying to limit that liability to a certain dollar amount. So what we're asking to do is to go back to Munson and say, yeah, we're going to do this, but we're going to negotiate the limits of the county's liability in doing this work.
Well, I think the significant piece here is that the entire plume is under asphalt.
Yeah.
So it truly, other than some underground flow through, it's not like it's getting, rained on, snowed on, anything else. The plume is relatively stable because of the fact that there's no outside water source being added to it. Great. Ron?
I agree with that. It's more of getting the site ready for development.
Dan?
How big is this plume? As big as this room? Is it, how big is it?
Hopefully you have the map in there.
I don't have it with me now.
The plume is not very,
Oh, I see it, okay.
it goes a little bit into the main parking lot of Munson Medical
We
Center.
just want to close it and cap our liability.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry.
Is there further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
Oh, she's not done yet.
I know.
Now we're going to talk about the draft housing strategy that you all received.
That's something separate than what we did prior?
Right, and that was the confusion, because the strategy was included, but
Yep.
the target strategy was not.
Oh,
That's-
gotcha. So we need to approve these documents,
We
and
need
the
to
target
approve-
one, we need to go look
Right.
at. Gotcha, all right.
That was our confusion.
I'm like, huh?
I'm going to be covering the inventory and the strategy. You should have received actually two documents. The housing inventory, which is a report document, and this is basically information. This is data that was prepared. We contracted with Northwest Michigan Council of Governments. Sarah Lucas, who happens to be here this evening, was the author of this document, and this is something that is not requiring your approval at this time. It's just really just for information and gives us the basis for the second document, which is what I want to focus a little bit more on, and is what is under your consideration today, is the housing strategy. And this is actually really kind of a plan, a policy document to address some of the issues that have come up in the inventory. Just to give you some background in terms of where Grand Traverse County has been in terms of the housing, is to look back actually for many years, actually prior even to 2003, the county has been a recipient of community development block grant monies for housing. But in 2003, a key document was developed, was the housing needs assessment. This was done for Grand Traverse County and several of our neighboring counties, and essentially is a market study to identify what is lacking in terms of housing in Grand Traverse County. The Land Bank Authority, created in 2006, has a focus on addressing housing affordability in Grand Traverse County along with economic development, and that's a very valuable tool in terms of development and redevelopment of property in Grand Traverse County. In 2009, there was a follow-up needs assessment, and that was then followed up with the Housing Trust Fund, which was really a effort that stemmed from the Land Bank Authority in utilizing the revenues from tax foreclosed properties to create a trust fund that is really providing gap funding for housing projects within Grand Traverse County that are affordable housing projects. This is really a unique fund for those not familiar with it. And one of the reasons that it was to remind everybody, one of the reasons it was established was that Traverse City area is the largest urban area in northern Michigan, and yet because it's a large urban area, it doesn't really qualify for some of the more rural types of programs out there. And yet we're not as big as some of the places downstate that get funding for housing and so forth. So what we were looking for was some type of sustainable local program that could be developed to help with housing projects in the future. Last year was a very significant year. Prior to 2012, Grand Traverse County was actually contracting with the City Housing Commission and actually made annual appropriations of $40,000 to the City Housing Commission to support a housing coordinator, as well as the housing programs that were essentially county programs but being managed by the City Housing Commission. We took that out of that the City Housing Commission and put them within the Planning Development Department, at least that's what the county board did, and we were able to eliminate that annual appropriation of $40,000. We now have the expanded some of those housing programs, and that's to some extent with the targeted plan that was mentioned earlier. And we also have the housing coordinator within the Planning and Development Department. This particular inventory and strategy is actually one part of a four-part grant that we received from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and that was for a community challenge planning grant. About $49,000 was used for the development of the inventory and strategy. We contracted with council governments to provide that service and develop those plans. This is also functioning as the housing element in the new master plan for Grand Traverse County. So this is a key piece because housing in Grand Traverse County, we've had a lot of studies and so forth, but never a full-blown strategy. It was important to really relate that back to the overall master plan. The inventory, again, is really an assessment of our existing housing stock with an emphasis on affordability. The strategy really provides the framework to take action and really help the community meet its housing needs and ensure housing choices. The strategy in terms of process utilized, there was a committee of local and county representatives. There was the Traverse Area Association of Realtors was represented on that committee, as well as the City Housing Commission. That committee oversaw the development of the inventory and the strategy. These documents have been in front of the Grand Vision Housing Solutions Network, which is really a large group of area housing agencies that represent or representatives of area housing agencies had a chance to review this. It's also been in front of the Land Bank Authority and the Planning Commission, and both recommended for approval of these documents, or at least the strategy. I just want to highlight some of the major issues that came out of the inventory. There's a lot of really good information that is valuable, but here's some of the highlights. There is certainly a shortage of accessible housing and small rentals in Grand Traverse County. And by accessible housing, I mean that type of housing that meets the needs of people with special physical needs. There's certainly a shortage of that housing, as well as small rentals. What I'm talking there is in terms of typically like one-bedroom rentals and so forth in our community. A lot of times, people that are single are looking for one-bedroom apartments and so forth, but are only finding 2 bedrooms. And so that ends up having people taken to a situation where they're now renting a 2-bedroom apartment. It's much more expensive and is taking out of the market unit that might be available to a family. The affordability issue is another one that came clear. That's something that I think we've heard about, but we now have a little bit more better understanding of that, in that nearly half of all the rental households live in unaffordable housing, including 80% of those earning $20,000 or less. 40% of owner-occupied households in Grand Traverse County are considered low income, and that the average household spends over 57% of its income on combined housing and transportation. That really highlights an important issue. We've heard over and over the idea of people having to drive to qualify. And if you look to that map up there, basically the dark areas tend to be ones that actually have the higher percentage of affordable housing. So out in our more rural areas is where most people will find the affordable housing. The thing is when they do move out into those locations, they might be able to afford the house, but they also have an increased cost in terms of transportation and then also energy as well. An interesting part of the housing inventory also looked at condition of homes, working with the Equalization Department, as well as getting information from the U.S. Census, defined about 800 homes within Grand Traverse County as poor condition, with a large percentage of those typically older, outdated mobile homes. And then also looking again at energy costs, which I mentioned, along with the transportation, is significant impact on people in terms of their spending on housing. Some of the trends and projections, obviously we're a community that's it's aging. We're a little bit older than the rest of the state. Our median age is higher than the rest of the state and higher than the rest of the nation, and projections are going to see that increasing. It's pretty steady for the future. We're also seeing the boomers are now retiring, and they're looking to downsize their homes. Also, the younger generation, the millennials, which are people born after 1980, are looking for, they're not necessarily looking for a large home in the rural area. They're looking for the options to be more in centralized areas where there's more activities closer to work and so forth. And overall, looking at the national housing demand, there's certainly there's a greater interest in small lot, single-family homes. And probably one of the bigger issues in Grand Traverse County is rental housing across the board. Depending on, it doesn't matter what your income is, the need for rental housing, the type, in more rental housing in Grand Traverse County is certainly increasing. Just to kind of go over the strategy, it has basically 4 areas. The first one, build and preserve, is really about the need to obviously increase overall stock, with housing stock in Grand Traverse County. One of the things that we're really trying to work, and this is where it ties in well with the master plan, is really to focus on what the Grand Vision calls growth and investment areas, and really building on those areas where we already have the infrastructure, making further infrastructure improvements, so that those are the places where you can have increased number of houses in those areas. Those are areas where there's also jobs, and so it gives people a better opportunity to have shorter commutes to work. The second one is financing and resources, and that's really looking at really taking what resources we do have in terms of the county and leveraging those, utilizing some of our tools like the Land Bank Authority as well as the Brownfield Authority, which also has certainly a role to play in this, particularly looking in more of the urban areas and seeing opportunities for redevelopment. Planning and zoning is really about reducing the barriers to housing. In many cases can be local zoning that's already in place, and seeing where there's opportunities to be more flexible, looking at mixed use, as well as creating opportunities for a variety of housing types within the community. The last part is data and education, where we continuously need to do outreach to our community and keep track of the data. And actually what I want to do in terms of outreach, what I'd like to show to you this evening is a video that was prepared in partnership with this project. This was produced by the Northwest Michigan Council of Governments, and hopefully this will work all right.
Erin Bernhard works at United Way in Traverse City and says she enjoys living in the community.
It has everything I want. It has water, it has nature, but it also has a thriving social community and enough balance in those two worlds that really makes it really a worthwhile place to be.
While there's a lot Bernhard likes about Traverse City, there is something she'd like to see more of: affordable rental housing. Her roommate is getting ready to move, and Bernhard has spent 5 months trying to find a new place to rent.
I'm, looking for a place in the downtown area because, it's close to my office here at the United Way. It's close to everything that I want to be a part of. It's, bikeable and walkable, which are big components of my life. I'm looking for a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, but it's much harder than you would expect it to be to find something like that. I'm on Craigslist twice a day looking at new postings.
Finding decent, affordable rental housing is an issue facing a variety of household types in Northwest Lower Michigan. That includes single professionals like Bernhard, young families, senior citizens, and people with disabilities. Eric Hoover was homeless and spent a year on a waiting list before he was able to move into an apartment at Riverview Terrace in Traverse City, which provides affordable housing for seniors and people with disabilities.
It's been quite a road. It's been at least a 12-month wait list at this particular building. It's been a total of 2 years since I moved back home to Michigan, and it's just been 4 times in the shelter, couch homeless is what the state was declared me. Just searching and looking, and I'm finally in housing 2 weeks as today.
Working families not yet in a position to purchase a home also face a difficult rental market. That's often the case for Coast Guardsmen at the Traverse City Air Station.
So if they can't find suitable rentals within Traverse City, then they start driving in all different directions until they can find something that's suitable. And I have folks that, some of them are traveling in, driving 45 minutes to an hour. And it shouldn't be that way. They should be able to live within 5 or 10 minutes of the air station.
I've talked to a lot of people trying to find places to rent. It's really tough. I've even got one of my parents looking at coming out here, and we're doing the same thing, trying to find something that he could afford on a fixed income. And there's not much around.
630 Lofts at the Grand Traverse Commons is a wonderful example of how public-private partnerships can provide adequate and affordable housing to residents. Through federal and state tax credit programs, as well as the county's Brownfield program, 630 Lofts developers were able to raise over $13 million in capital, a majority of which came from private investors, to redevelop a portion of historic Building 50 into 39 affordable apartments. The financing package requires the units to be rented at reduced rates to eligible persons of limited means.
The rental housing market in general in the Traverse region is very strong. The demand on the affordable units is even stronger than the market across the board, I believe. So when we do have openings, when we have open units, they're filled within a matter of a day or two. As soon as we can flip a unit, clean and change a unit over.
Grand Traverse County is developing a housing inventory and strategy funded by a U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Community Challenge grant. That inventory and strategy will provide tools that will help housing organizations and local governments address housing needs. To learn more about local efforts to create more housing opportunities, please visit the Planning and Development section of the Grand Traverse County website or the Housing Solutions Network section of the Grand Vision website. If you are looking for housing resources in Northwest Lower Michigan, please visit nwmhousingsearch.org.
Really, just the last slide was really talking about implementation in terms of where the strategy is really doing is providing some guidance. It's not necessarily etched in stone. It's basically giving us some structure on which to move forward. We've put a lot of pieces together, the Land Bank Authority, that there's housing programs, the Housing Trust Fund. Now it's a matter of utilizing those, leveraging those, and partnering with other entities to really have an impact. The private sector is essential to addressing a lot of these issues, but there's also opportunities in working with nonprofit housing partners like Habitat for Humanity and Homestretch, as well as other aligned agencies like the Michigan State Housing Development Authority. So really moving this forward is an effort that really the county has one part of that leadership, and it's our ability to leverage what we do have to work with those others to have an impact in our community. And I guess with that, I would ask if you have any questions or comments.
Yeah, the city has a housing commission. Does the county have a housing commission?
It doesn't. And I don't know the history if there was one act. I thought maybe there was one in place at one time.
At one time there was in the early 80s.
Okay. The mayor has asked whether or not we would be like to appoint people on the Traverse City Housing Commission, and so I'm just wondering how that would fit and how that would work and how we want to make something like that work, if that's even a possibility as to whether or not we want to expand and try and not make it a city housing commission but a Grand Traverse County Housing Commission and make it all encompassing and start to be able to implement some of these strategies that you've looked at, other than relying upon our planning commission to do that.
We are looking, when we look at the housing strategy, we're looking at several components of implementation on that strategy. When we looked at the Housing Trust Fund, we investigated different opportunities for housing. One was a housing authority, one was combining with the City Housing Commission. We decided to go in phases and steps and went through the Land Bank Authority as the housing board overseeing the housing programs. And the staff is going to be looking at the strategies and making recommendations on how to implement these strategies. And that'll be coming back to the Land Bank Authority and an overview to the County Board of Commissioners as well. And that will be one component of that, Herb, is looking at a Housing Commission, Housing Authority join with City Housing Commission.
I would appreciate if you would look into that and kind of give us a report back as to the feasibility and and how it might want to look like, and I'm sure the mayor would like to have that information also.
I think if I can, one of the things that we've seen come out very openly or very, very large, since the county took the county's housing issues from the City Housing Commission, we have seen a huge increase in making those services available to out county areas.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we just received grant permission from the MISTA to include Fife Lake and the village of Kingsley. Those would have never qualified under any past guidelines whatsoever. But by the county being an active participant in the housing needs of our community, we have been able to get MISTA to authorize home improvements and home improvement loans to some of those people. You know, we have a homeowner buyer program.
Mm-hmm.
We have a homeowner renovation and maintenance program that is available to people of low incomes within our community. Those are being administered through the planning department under the guidelines of the Grand Traverse County Land Bank Authority at this time. So far, I'm pretty excited about what's been happening. I've sat on your land bank since 2008, I think.
I think so.
Quite a while, and this whole housing trust fund and all of the stuff that went with that, along with the changeover to the county running their own housing program, has kind of been under my watch, and I'm really excited about what's happened. And later in announcements, I'm going to tell you about an exciting thing that happened this morning. So,
I think, on
further
this,
questions, comments?
the only other comment I was going to make is, when you start looking at the rental housing units in Grand Traverse County, particularly in the city of Traverse City and Garfield Township, 40% of those properties are rental units.
But look at what their affordability is.
But that's the other question, is the affordability on that. So, so you look at 40% of the properties are non-homesteaded, and those people are paying the higher taxes to be able to support the services in our community.
Do we have a motion to approve the 2013 housing strategy in your pocket?
Yes, sir.
Motion by Thomas, supported by Lathrop. Further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay, that brings us to the Finance Committee.
I'll be brief. On page 24 is a summary of your general fund. I've noted the variances in terms of revenues and expenditures. They're all accountable or explainable at this point. In regards to revenues, I've recorded some transactions earlier this year than we had recorded them in 2012. They're all within budget. I'm not seeing any variances on either the revenue or expenditure sides of the budget. The expenditure difference, as noted here, is primarily due to the timing of the appropriations that the board has built into the 2013 budget. I recorded those in February this year. Last year we made those first quarter appropriations in March. So everything is pretty much a timing difference. And then the actual trial balance is the next page of your packet. Unless there are any questions, we'll move into the budget amendments.
Any questions in regard to the trial balances? Okay, well, Dean, will you outline the budget adjustments, please?
Yeah, just, there's three that are listed on page 27 in your packet. We've moved within the housing grant, basically creating a separate department for the program income. The program income is primarily from the loans. It's a revolving loan program. We've determined it's easier to keep that activity in a separate department, so that's what this, the first budget amendment is doing, the $61,521, just creating a separate account for that activity. Then the Commission on Aging, I'm correcting, this is the $10,000 budget adjustment, correcting an overstatement in last month's budget adjustments. And then the last budget amendment, we under-budgeted the contract services line item in facilities for our custodial services. There was sufficient fund balance to cover that, and that's what I'm proposing here, the three budget amendments to make the corrections as I have discussed.
Okay, do we have a motion? Motion by Rennie, supported by Inman to approve the budget adjustments. Is there any further discussion? Herb?
The custodial services, is that an increase in the quote from the custodial contract, or is this, or what created this?
No, there was some confusion, and I did not catch it when we put the budget together, somewhat due to the fact that we added the new health services building.
Oh, yeah.
The numbers in the note that Danny and Janice had put together, I should have caught this, I did not, but it's not a contract increase, with the exception of the fact that we did add the new health services building.
Okay. Any further questions for Dean? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. It brings us to administration. Restoration of the historical clock.
I'm going to have Danny come up and talk about that.
Last time we got into this, we didn't really want to pay the money.
Danny Brown, the Director of Facilities for Grand Traverse County. You want me to explain it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I can do it, but since you've been here all night, I might as well give you something to do.
Danny, pull the speaker down to you.
Pardon?
Pull the speaker down. There you go.
Okay, basically, you've got this in your packet, right? So I don't really have to read this or anything or explain that portion of it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Anyway, there are some people that, when she put this article out in the ticker, I talked to her today. And
Did you thank her?
all right. And she had about 10 responses through emails and whatnot, and telephone calls. About 6 of those responders were people that said, "Where do I send a check?" And the question is, how do we do this? I've never done a fundraiser, so I don't know anything about it. Dave and I have chatted about it, about how to implement it, and Dean as well. I don't know. Do you set up a separate trust fund for it?
We were just talking about that. And Dean suggests, go ahead.
I would suggest that, I know there's the potential to do something with the community foundation. I think for people that are willing to contribute or donate to this effort, one concern that they would have would be whether or not this would be a tax-deductible contribution for them. They can do that by simply making a contribution to Grand Traverse County. This would be, it fits the public purpose, which is a IRS tax requirement. That's not an issue. We can give them a receipt. There are some changes in the tax code, which I'm not going to give tax advice, but I would recommend if we do this, that we simply account for the funds here in our trust and agency fund. We create a separate account to keep these dollars separate, because they should be used for the purpose for which people are donating them for.
Okay, and I guess the reason that I'm here, well, there's two reasons, actually, there's another reason, but is to have you approve us going out and doing this. I mean, she's going to write another article, she's ready to put another article out that says Grand Traverse County has accepted the fact that they will take in donations, and the mechanics of it, her being a reporter, I'll have to, or we should probably formulate something for her that says what Dean just said, actually.
Dean, I guess my question would be, should we identify this TNA account as for the restoration and preservation of the historic courthouse? You know, because I hate to limit it just to the clock, because I know there's a lot of discussion about retaining that historic courthouse. We had a discussion once about tearing it down when we were talking about building a new jail, and that was an ugly night. You know? That was an ugly night. We don't even want to remember that. But the point is, we may or may not receive funds in excess of what it takes to restore the clock. Then what do? Do I try to send money back to some of these people, or how do we do that? So I'm inclined to think that we'd be better off to create the account toward the restoration and preservation of the historic courthouse.
The chairman brings up my main concern with this, and that would be simply that fact that we don't raise sufficient funds to do this. Of course, there's the issue of whether or not the board would make up the difference, you know, based on whatever contributions. But the thought that I had was along the lines of what you were presenting. There should be a broader purpose, such as funds for preserving the historical courthouse. I mean, it would be almost wise to have anyone who would donate towards this give us permission to use it for, you know, a broader purpose, so that we wouldn't, I mean, if you, say for example, you raise $2,000, and generally if somebody's going to give for a purpose that's a restricted source of funds, it really needs to be used for that purpose, because you want to honor the, you know, those donors' requests, and that would be the intent here. And like I said, one option would be the board may consider to still do this project if you don't raise $8,000, but in soliciting, or maybe that's not the term I want to use, in requesting or letting folks donate towards this, if you could somehow indicate that, you know, there would be another purpose that they would be okay with. I don't know exactly how you would word that, but that's my main concern. If we don't raise sufficient funds, I mean, returning the funds to the donors is obviously an option. That's going to be somewhat of an administrative nightmare.
Chris?
We could choose one of our parks for an operation maintenance fund, couldn't we?
Well, I'm inclined to think that if
improvement
people are
fund?
looking to restore the clock, that any funds coming to that should be used for the preservation of the historic courthouse. You know, here, a couple of years ago, we spent some significant money digging out, is it northwest wall? East wall. You know, where we had leaking coming through the wall. We had to have it dug out, and, you know, it was a significant cost, you know, but that being said, it was absolutely essential toward the preservation of the whole.
Well, it is an old building, I'm sure we'll find something.
And I'm sure there's going to be more places. Even though we've spent a significant amount of money, you know, upgrading it, and you know, with the renovations, it's still an old building. It needs a lot of maintenance.
It is, and the west side is now leaking, so I got to do something about that this summer.
Larry?
I guess I need to back up on this, Danny.
Yes.
If my memory serves me right, back, and Sonny and a couple other you guys are going to have to help me with this, back when we, in a prior board, we approved the dollar amount to basically redo the historic courthouse.
Right.
And, you know, the windows and insulation and all those miscellaneous things that we really needed to take care of, the moisture problem, all those other things, issues. And I believe the issue of the clock came up, and I think the report was the clock doesn't work. And it was going to be like $50,000 or $40,000 to fix the clock, and the board said, we're not spending that kind of money to repair this clock when we don't even know if we can repair it or how long it will last, and is that really where we need to go? Now, do I understand this, that the clock is working, it's just not the bell?
That's correct.
So how did you get the 50 minutes off?
This is just to have a company called Barden Company out of Ohio. They build, they've been in the clock business for 200 years. They build a black box that simply hits the bell. That's all it does. But the uniqueness of it is that there's a remote control. I can stand down in the parking lot and control that, and it does other chimes, like a presidential death chime. There's a certain bell chime that goes along with that, and it does a lot of different things. And you can either have it come on the half hour or the hour or whatnot, but it's only for that purpose.
Okay, are there any, designated historical facilities, are there any available, grant funds available?
Not to my knowledge.
All right.
Larry, one of the things, if I...
I don't know how the clock got fixed.
If I can help with that discussion.
Yeah.
We had two different parts of the repair of this clock. One was to repair the hands and things, and I believe we moved forward with that portion. But the one thing, or no, we didn't actually do that either. You know, and remember that those are old wooden hands up there. They're not.
Yeah,
they're not brass. They're not cast iron. They're wooden hands on that clock.
When did we fix the clock?
But I guess the most important piece about this is that Antrim County has a clock exactly like the clock that we have.
Yeah, Antrim.
And the counterweights on the clock fell through the roof, through the ceiling, down into the public area, and fortunately, no one was injured. So at that point, we directed Danny to disable the counterweights and secure them so there was no potential that could happen here.
That's correct.
And so since that day, when they secured the counterweights, the clock is no longer chimed. You know, it still functions, but it doesn't chime. And you know, we've had this discussion before. A couple years ago, we had the discussion about having an electronic chime put in there. And there was a couple different things. You know, you can do the speaker type chimes, but that doesn't get you that historical look. Or that's the historical sound. You know, the black box that he's talking about gets us the same chime sound that we had originally. You know, and what's interesting is, you know, I'm sure that if Chris goes around the neighborhood, she's going to find there's people that would like to hear the clock chime again, but there's going to be just as many would like to have it quiet.
You get both.
You know, and I'm guessing that's a flip of the coin which way you want to go.
My guess is
it's just the idea, you know, I don't want to ask people to donate money to restore it and then have 200 people in here next week saying, we don't want that thing chiming at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and the other piece is, you know, you got circuit court up there in the third floor. Do they want to hear that chime all day long?
Well, they did for years.
They did, yeah.
Went on for 100 years.
I think somebody better ask them.
Well, you know, I guess that's a board decision how we want to do it.
That thing would drive me crazy
I think
working
there's
up
probably
there.
some more discussion probably needs to be had before such time as we turn the chime back on, if you will.
Not the charm, the chime.
I said chime.
I really think that's the issue, as to whether or not we want to have chimes on that. And maybe what we need to do is look at whether or not we want to do a public hearing and at least extend our concerns out to the city commission and saying, you know, it's your neighborhood.
Right.
And maybe they should have some sort of an input into this thing. But, you know, I think the people that are wanting to donate this money are the ones that want the chime working. They're not interested in repairing the walls or anything else or putting money into parks. They're looking at that. And so I think we need to have input from the community as to whether or not we want the chimes working. And if we want the chimes working, then I think it's up to us to say, yes, we want the chimes working. If you can raise 50% of the cost by donations and we come up with the other 50%, we do a match, then we go ahead and we buy the chimes. But not until after we've gotten the input from the community.
I agree with that.
I think there's a lot of discussion has to be had amongst ourselves and the community before we turn the chime back on there.
Okay.
So, okay?
As far as Danny, as far as if you're going to accept money and all that kind of stuff, I think it's too early. To keep their names, find out how much they are willing to donate, and then when this thing opens up, then let the public know that we're going to take your names.
And perhaps,
Yeah.
perhaps one of the best way for us to get the feedback is to have this lady from the Ticker write the article that she wanted to write.
Yep.
And tell her that the county board is trying to survey the community as to whether or not they want the chime turned back on.
Right.
You know, I don't know about the rest of you, but I read this silly thing every single morning. One of the first things I do when I open my computer. You know, so, you know, I think there's a lot of the community that reads this and would have an opportunity to have input. You know, we can hold a public hearing and we'll probably be lucky if we put a dozen people in here. But the fact that they have the ability to get information out to the people and get feedback. You know, on the bottom of every one of their articles is an opportunity to send back comment.
Right.
30,000 people get the Ticker on a daily basis.
Really? Wow. First time I've ever seen it since you wrote the article. I didn't know it existed.
Okay. Any other discussion?
And
on
it's
this
a
issue?
freebie. Anybody can get the Ticker. They can just sign up, and the Ticker will come to them on a daily basis.
On the computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we will move. Danny's not going to run off too far because we got another issue with him, but
Yeah.
we're going to move forward real quick in regard to the Boom Boom Club and the 4th of July fireworks.
Yes, this is a request to update the agreement from last year to a 2013 agreement. They're asking for $2,000 to help sponsor the fireworks for 4th of July. And monies are budgeted. And anything that's not budgeted, we'll make sure it gets budgeted. It's not that much.
Larry?
I'm inclined to go ahead and improve it. We did it last year, but we had an understanding as a Board of Commissioners for the new ones that, you know, we're going to, if we give $2,000 to them, we're going to give $1,000 to Fife Lake for their South County fireworks during the 4th of July, and that goes directly to the Chamber of Commerce in Fife Lake. So, you know, if we're going to do it for one, I'd do it for the other as part of the county. So,
Didn't we cut that to 500 from Fife Lake?
I think it went to 1,000.
I thought
Dave
we
Dave
went
could look into
500.
it, but.
500.
Dane, what was the amount that we got, or we gave Fife Lake?
I believe it was $500.
Was it 500?
But you're right, a separate agreement for the other entity.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve this particular agreement for the Boom Boom Club for $2,000 for the 013 distribution. And then I'd like to make a second motion after.
Support.
All right, motion by Inman, supported by Max Bauer to allocate $2,000 to the Boom Boom Club for 4th of July fireworks in Traverse City.
Coming out of which fund?
It's
budgeted.
budgeted in your miscellaneous contingency cost center.
Further discussion? Those in favor
Just
say
one thing.
boom, boom.
You're wearing your T-shirt.
Boom, boom, boom,
I'm afraid to
t-shirt.
ask what that was.
I could have done without that part. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same.
Thomas shall
Motion
flash the
carried.
board.
Mr. Chairman, if we could ask the county administrator to bring back the history of the donations from Fife Lake for their fireworks, and then we can determine what we want to do from there.
It'll be a separate agreement. When
Yeah.
we get that one, we can vote on that one too.
Yeah, well, it'll be forthcoming, so we might as well get it on the docket.
All right, that takes care of that. We have no unfinished business, new business. Herb, you asked for discussion about the beta.
Yeah, when I first got this information from, I think I read the paper or something else about how the Federal Transit Authority has decided that Beta should not provide transportation for school kids in Suttons Bay. You know, I'm a very strong component of public transportation, and that really irritated me. That's probably at the top of my list of things that have happened in my tenure as to irritation. And so I started looking around. I've contacted Senator Stabenow's office and Representative Benechek's office. They were not aware of it at that point, but they are diligently working on this issue. We also are working with the tribe and with Sutton's Bay Schools, and I did talk to the Commission for Leland and Leelanau, and they also would like to have a copy of this resolution. And so I'm really, trying to make an issue of this. I've asked our Republican Party to also start looking at writing letters to be able to start to get down to the Federal Transit Authority to make sure that they reverse this decision. And I have gotten some information back from Tom Menzel that they are continually working on this, that I think that the number one issue is that 40% of the children that ride this bus are American Indians and 20% of the children are Hispanic. And so this is a critical piece to making sure that kids get to school in a safe environment, which Beta has been able to provide for this community. So I'm asking the board to support this resolution supporting Bay Area Transit Authority for flex route service in Leelanau County. And that's my motion.
We have a motion by Limco, supported by Lathrop. Further discussion?
I don't know why we're sticking our nose into Leelanau County's business.
Because Leelanau and Grand Traverse County are a single Beta
That's,
public transportation.
well, I've never been a fan of Beta anyway. Big money loser.
Not anymore.
They're doing well.
They're making money.
Yeah, they are.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay,
Natural gas.
natural gas. I guess maybe I'll start with just a little history. I've done a natural gas contract in my business since 2006. And in 2008, I started talking to Danny about entering into a natural gas purchase agreement through a third-party supplier because there was a significant money savings. Literally, since the county signed on, we have saved the citizens of Grand Traverse County hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in natural gas contracts. I went back this morning and just punched in my trusty little computer, and in 2007, I paid $7.44 per 1,000 cubic feet for natural gas. That's what I paid. That would have been the contract that ended in February of 2007. 2008, it was $8.30. 2009, it was $5.99. 2010, it was $6.24. 2011, it was $4.74. Last year, it was $3.99. We are less than half the cost of natural gas today than we were paying in 2007. Grand Traverse County uses between 20 and 25 million cubic feet a year. That's a huge amount of money. This has been a fabulous savings for us. But that being said, and most of you will remember, I've always pushed this thing well into March because I've always thought that the numbers should go down. And I still believe the numbers should go down. The number's too high right now. With the cold winter that we've had, and all the way across the nation, natural gas prices are not coming down. In fact, they're going up. If we'd have signed 3 weeks ago, 3.5 weeks ago, we'd have got gas for $4.14. Today, well, as of this morning, the cost on a 12-month contract is $4.59. Danny and I locked in last week on your behalf at $4.52 for the month of April, giving us an opportunity to see if when spring actually comes, the natural gas comes down. There are billions of cubic feet of surplus natural gas. Why the number is staying up, I don't know. Even on the New York Stock Exchange, it's still at 370, 375. It's absolutely absurd the price that natural gas is selling for today. But I firmly believe that number's coming down. But I guess my biggest part about this discussion is we locked our April number at $4.52. At this point, there is no purpose for us to sign a contract at $4.59 for the next 12 months. Now, if at the end of April, we don't see a price less than that $4.52, we need to probably lock the county's contract.
Right.
do.
But, you know, I don't like the roller coaster thing, where you ride whatever the market rate is. The one question and I was gonna go back and look today, I don't know what the current DTE price is.
I don't either, but the last time I did look and ask that question, I think it was $6 and something.
I was gonna say, the last time I
higher
did
than
see the DTE contract, it was about $6.30. And
Something
at
around
that
there.
point, I was paying $39.9, and I wasn't interested in paying $6.30. So, you know, I guess the upgrade the information that I have, and Danny can add to this anything he has, we did meet with another supplier last week?
Yeah,
2 weeks,
last week.
Last week. Another company that is also a third-party vendor. And at that point, we just decided we weren't quite comfortable, ready to change vendors. We've had a very good relationship with IGS for a long time. And, you know, at least my recommendation, and I think it was Danny's recommendation, is that we hang on to this locked-in contract for the month of April and see where we're at, what kind of a number they give us for May on a 12-month contract.
Yeah.
Anything
Said
else?
it all.
Well,
Do you need approval for that?
probably not. 'cause if
Not
we already
now.
did-
Okay.
I'll have to come back, and when we lock the number down, then
When
I'll
we
come
lock
back.
the number down, there'll be a contract that has to be signed by the
Okay.
facilities director or David or somebody.
I think Dave.
I think David signs it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, like I said, I've negotiated this contract for a long time, and there's nothing, not one thing in any of the information that I have tells me that the price of gas should be $4.60. It just doesn't make any sense. And even the gentleman that I deal with out of Ohio tells me exactly the same thing. He's been doing this for 20 years, and he doesn't understand how it can possibly be $4.60 with the amount of gas that's available. But it is.
It is what it is.
Danny, thank you.
Thank you.
And Sonny, I want to say thank you for being involved with this. So,
Okay, this brings us to our second opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone wishing to make a comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to Commissioner Committee reports. Yes?
I attended last Friday the Michigan Association of Counties Economic Development Committee meeting, and there is concern around the state of Michigan regarding the income counties receive on personal property. Apparently, and I hope I'm explaining this correctly, apparently the state legislature has a $40,000 cap, so that if you have $40,000 or less in personal property, you don't pay tax on it.
This is the proposal that needs to go to the voters.
Yes.
Oh, it's a proposal.
Well,
This was passed by the legislature.
Yes.
But it's got to go to the voters.
yes. The
This is the
problem
deal.
with this is businesses are already breaking up into smaller LLCs, GE
Smaller
being the
container.
first, being one of them down in Dearborn.
So that everything's $40,000.
And so everything is $40,000 or less.
They're just setting up different
So there will be
corporations.
no tax to the business. And this is a concern, and
The
I...
sooner we can eliminate personal property tax, the better for businesses from one side of
Well,
the
if
state
this
to the other.
passes and all the businesses go to small LLCs, there won't be any.
There is nothing about personal property tax.
So I thought I
that's
would,
fair
I
to
thought I
anybody.
would report that.
It's not. Anyone else?
yeah, I did attend one of the seminars at the MAC conference on the reorganization of our courts. And MAC had hired a company to come in and look at whether or not this was a feasible thing to be able to do for the state of Michigan. And they come back and said, due to the complexity of all the individual courts throughout the state of Michigan, it's not possible. So, you know, if you're looking at court reorganization in the state of Michigan, it's probably a dead issue. But the court themselves will start to do some benchmarking or looking at different things within the courts to say, we're expecting that the highest and best usage of these individual programs, this is what we expect a court to be able to do. And so they will start to put some of that stuff out to be able to to make sure that the courts in our communities will start to at least attain those certain levels of service. I know that our courts has done an excellent job, and I want to compliment them, but it's just that some of the courts throughout the communities are not reaching that level of service. So, just let the courts know that's probably not going to be an issue that Mac's going to be working on to be able to make that happen.
Larry? Just a side remark, I'd like to just compliment Commissioner Max Bauer on signing up for this MAC committee, because it is it's a big commitment. I mean, you actually, have to drive down to Lansing, could be monthly, during a snowstorm or whatever, and attend these committee meetings, and they're very important, very informative. And the committee meetings down in Lansing, the various ones that they have, this is a commissioner-run, operated organization, as you know, and the opinions of those folks that go down to those committees are how they set their legislative platform for the year, and that's how, and then that's their direction in terms of lobbying. So it's important to have commissioners participate in these committees, and it's a big burden, especially when you live in Traverse City. There's an extensive drive down and back, and so I want to thank her just for representing Grand Traverse County, one of the committees.
One of the things, education is going both ways. One of the other commissioners was talking about how the courts, we got on the subject of how the governor is going to base our revenue sharing on certain criteria. And one of the criteria is going to be supposedly unfunded liabilities. And I raised the question, I said, our judges went in the last time in circuit court. We were going to negotiate with employees, and the judges went in and they just made the labor agreement and said, here you go, county board. Yeah. And I said, we had no control over that, yet we are the funding agent. And I said, so how the governor can make us, our revenue sharing depend on these unfunded liabilities makes no sense, because it's out of our control to a certain extent. And a gentleman from Chippewa County said we had an issue with the courts as well. One of our new judges wanted to raise the court administrator's salary $50,000 a year, and the county board said, we don't think so. And the judge threatened the county board with contempt of court, and the county board said, go ahead and put us in jail. The judge backed off, and the MAC employee who was in the room said, judges can do that? And we said, yes, they can. And so the education is really going both ways. Next month, the discussion is going to center on governments and tribal relationships.
Oh, interesting.
So,
okay.
And by the way, anybody that wants to go in and be part of that meeting, you don't have to drive to Lansing. They're using GoToMeetings. So if you want to be part of that discussion, you just let Shasta know down there, and she can give you an invitation to go to meetings. So any of the commissioners that would like to be able to do it, you don't have to drive down there. You can get on that committee, or you can listen in on those particular discussions, whatever committee is on there, by using GoToMeetings, and you could do it right in your own house and be able to be part of it, which I commend the MAC for finally starting to do that, because driving for 6 hours for a 2-hour meeting is, to me, took me out of the ability to want to be able to be part of any of those committees. And first of all, it's driving that much, but also the expense for the county to be able to provide that. So I just want to commend MAC for being able to offer that opportunity to go to the GoToMeetings.
Are there any other commissioners? Okay, I told you earlier I have a very exciting piece of news. This morning, Grand Traverse County Land Bank finalized a partnership with Homestretch and Habitat for Humanity to build the depot property.
Super.
The commitment by Grand Traverse County is a $195,000 HUD grant, which we have, has to be used for the purchase of property, and that will be used for the purchase of the property, and $100,000 out of our Housing Trust Fund to provide infrastructure to this project. Grand Traverse County will hold title for the property. We will be an active partner in this project, start to finish. You know, at some point, the property will be deeded back, whether it goes back to the Depot LLC, or whether we hold it until such time that the individual homeowners purchase those properties. There's 21 homes in this development. The one thing that, you know, most of you have heard me talk about for years with the Housing Trust Fund is I wanted to see something on the ground. I want to see something that we can make a difference. The commitment from Homestretch and from Habitat is committed to build 2 single-family homes yet in 2013, and Homestretch is committed to build 2 duplexes in 2013. So by the end of 2013, we should have 6 affordable houses in Grand Traverse County, with Grand Traverse County as an active participant. We are not just and I had a lot of discussion with both groups this morning, because in the past, we've provided them land and allowed them to use it because the land bank had taken tax foreclosed property, gave it back to them, and then they covered the tax bill. But, you know, I've said, you know, we're more of a partner than that. And the commitment is that we've even asked that their little video presentation, and I'm going to try to get them in here, probably not this month, but within the next couple months. They've got a video presentation of the Depot project, and it's a flyover, it's a walkthrough, it's a cut down for a buildup, so you can see exactly what's going to be there. But I'd like you to see that. But one of the things that I told them this morning is it currently says Homestretch, Habitat for Humanity Partners. Grand Traverse County needs to be there. I let them know very thoroughly that 2 years ago when we did the project with them on South Airport Road, I went to the groundbreaking ceremony. You know, Wayne Schmidt was there and spoke. There were people for the college that spoke, everything else. Grand Traverse County was not mentioned one time during the entire discussion, but we provided the land. You know, so we were an active participant from the ground up, literally. So, but I think, you know, we had a lot of discussion this morning. We are not just a funder. You know, we're not a contractor that's donating some time or a supplier that's donating some time. We are an equal partner in this project. The $295,000 that we committed this morning is more than the purchase cost of the entire parcel of property that they paid the city of Traverse City. So they need to recognize and acknowledge Grand Traverse County as a participant. And I'm a firm believer that we need to make sure that start to finish in this project, Grand Traverse County is out front. You know, most people are going to drive by that project and they're going to see it as a Homestretch project or a Habitat project. They're not going to recognize that Grand Traverse County was an active participant. But, you know, through the commitment this morning, I think they're very clear that we will be an active participant, but we're going to get the equal amount of recognition also.
Awesome. Good job. Okay. And by the way, those are energy efficient apartments, so
Net zero.
Net zero.
Net zero apartments. The solar arrays on the roofs of the Habitat homes, they figure will meet all the energy costs for 30 years. The Homestretch, they're not quite sure whether they're going to get quite to net zero on the duplexes, but they're going to be close. So, we have no need for closed session. Is there any notices or announcements? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support? All in favor, go home?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Hey, Chris?
Thank you.